Hey fellow photographers, what did you photograph today? So today I'm going to be sharing with you some of the negatives that I took on Worldwide Pinhole Photography Day way back in April of this year. It's the last Sunday in April. Now the issue is that with everything going on in the world, I don't really have access to my normal darkroom where I can go and make prints, so I decided to develop the negatives and scan them into the computer, so I'll be sharing those with you today. But before we get into that, I noticed in my YouTube analytics that over 80% of you aren't subscribed. So what is going on? Take 3 seconds and hit that subscribe button down below. It means a lot. So what did I photograph for Pinhole Photography Day? Well, with everything kind of in lockdown, I wanted to stay in the studio. So I set up a vase of flowers, which is super cliche, I know. But I really wanted to test out some of my larger format pinhole cameras. So what I did is I took 3 negatives on 8x10 film. I used Kodak T-Max 400. And I started with my super wide pinhole camera, which I had a whole build series on this channel, which I'll link up here somewhere, discussing how I built this camera, and now we get to see an image from that camera. So super wide 8x10, which is about an 80mm camera, which is about anywhere from about 9mm equivalent on full frame, so it's super duper wide field of view. I then used the Intrepid camera with a pinhole lens board, which I also covered in another video that I'll link up here, basically doing a super long exposure macro shot, and I'll describe that when we go look at it. And then the third is a camera that I borrowed from a friend, which is an 8x10 150mm pinhole camera made by the Santa Barbara Lensless Camera Company, and we'll discuss that in a little bit. So let's just jump it right into the pictures. So here's the first photograph I took on Worldwide Pinhole Photography Day, and this is using that 80mm super wide camera, which obviously gives a huge field of view. And the reason I took this photograph is kind of an establishing shot of the rest of the studio. So this is the studio kind of setup that I have where I normally film my videos. Back here, there's if you can see the chalkboard that I usually use. But right now it's set up with a bunch of this canvas stuff, which I was using to actually paint these V-flats back here. But here's the bouquet of flowers on a table, lots of black around to kind of isolate the bouquet. And your eyes are immediately kind of drawn to this triangle of light. Obviously there's this main key light, which is an LED light, and I want to use continuous lighting because the exposure times are very long, and I didn't want any bulb that would create a lot of heat to wilt the flowers or anything like that. So it's a large continuous LED light source here, and then obviously the light on the bouquet itself. It's a bouquet of lilies, and we'll get a better shot of this later, and the ceiling light. So it kind of has like triangle of bright space, which I think is right in the middle of the picture, and your eye is kind of drawn to it. But then you kind of like branch out and you see like little tiny quirky things, and obviously this picture means more to me, and it's more of a documentary type of photograph for my own personal, what was I doing on Worldwide Pinhole Photography Day. So it's not a stellar photograph by any means, but this kind of gives you an idea of what goes on behind the scenes. So we have all these lights here. We have this, actually, let's see, the resolution is ridiculous. So we have the other 2 cameras here that I'll be discussing. This is the 150mm 8x10 camera, which is pointed directly at the bouquet. And then we have, again, the Intrepid with the pinhole lens board attached up here. And what this is doing is actually at that 2 times bellows extension, so it's a 2-to-1 macro shot of a part of the bouquet. So we'll get into that in a second. But these are the other 2 cameras, and actually all of these pictures are being taken simultaneously. This photograph itself was about a 9-minute exposure, 9 to 11 minutes, I don't remember the exact time. The one here in the middle was also about 9 minutes, so you can see the dark slide pulled out here on the floor. So I took the picture here, and then this ended up being over a 2-hour exposure just because of the bellows extension factor, and the fact that when this is extended out fully like this, I think it's an f1080, f1080 effective aperture, which means that your exposure times plus reciprocity are just out of this world insane. So again, it's just an establishing shot of what's going on behind the scenes, and as your eye is drawn to the middle, then it kind of like wanders around the room, and again, it means more to me, but just interesting seeing all the stuff and crap that I have accumulated here. So we have the V-flats, here's some other seamless paper rolls that I use for backdrops for different photo things. There's a camera bag here. Here's some Ilford paper. Over here is where I keep my Jobo. So here's a Jobo chemical bottle, some weights on the floor for working out. It's just interesting. Obviously there's not a lot of shadow detail, and I was kind of exposing for this area here. So a lot of the bookshelf here, which has a lot of other photography related stuff, is kind of, the blacks are kind of crushed here. But again, it's an establishing shot, just interesting, kind of like working away around the room and kind of kind of doing like an I Spy of what I see, and again, a document to kind of look at the studio, what I was doing during this time of year. So now let's look at what is happening with this camera here that's taking a picture directly at the bouquet, which is this picture. Now, I absolutely love this photograph. I'm so excited about how it came out when I developed the negative. Obviously, before you even let it dry, you kind of hold it up to the light, and I could tell this was a winner. I really like how this came out. Yeah, I mean, so this is 150 millimeters on an 8x10 camera, which is, I would say like a normal wide angle. So a normal lens, which is usually like 50 millimeters on full frame cameras, is 300 in 8x10. So this is half of that. So figure around 25 millimeters on full frame equivalent camera. So it's a little wide, but it's also like super close to the subject. So it just kind of fully isolates that bouquet. And I think I did a really good job with the composition here. I could have probably moved it over just a little bit because there's a little bit more space here than there is with this leaf to the edge of the film. And these are full-size scan. You can see the little notches here. So these are absolutely full-size 8x10 scans of this is exactly what's on the negative. But it has like this really surreal, dreamlike quality. Everything is just soft enough but detailed enough that it really, really works for this photograph. Again, super excited about the way this turned out. The exposure is spot on, and these are scanned straight out of the Epson scanner that I used. No correction whatsoever. There's nothing here. It's just the straight TIFF file, and it just, you know, the way that this bulb catches the light and casts a little bit of a shadow in here, and it's just like really soft, dreamlike quality. And I think it kind of reminds me of really old photographs from when photography was getting started, when the lens technology wasn't there. And it's just amazing that you can get this much detail out of a pinhole. And yeah, I mean, every time I look at this photo, it just makes me smile. I think it's pretty awesome. But I'd love to hear what you guys think in the comments below. So this is another photograph where I'm a little upset that I don't have access to a proper darkroom right now, because this is one that I definitely want to get printed. And I've actually this summer been working on a workaround for darkroom access, and due to thanks to the kind generosity of my friend Judith, we were able to actually make a platinum palladium print of this negative, and I'll show that in future videos. So for those of you who don't know, platinum palladium printing, essentially you coat paper with a combination of platinum and palladium, and you can develop the pictures in daylight. Obviously when the paper is coated, you want to have subdued light, but then you put it out into the yard or under a UV box and, you know, do your test strips just the same. But you don't need the full, you know, red safe light environment of a darkroom when it comes to like resin coated or fiber based normal photographic paper, which is far too sensitive. Platinum palladium and other things like cyanotypes are much less sensitive, so they can be done pretty much in subdued light, and you can make prints. So I'll be showing that in a future video. Actually, speaking of prints, although I can't make prints right now, I've been practicing with some platinum palladium, but that's still a work in progress that I am nowhere near mastering. But in terms of traditional darkroom prints, although I can't make some now, I do have some darkroom prints that I have made that are actually now available on my online store, which is on my website. So if you go to cyrusarthur.com and click on the store button, you can get prints. Of course, not of this, because this is a newly formed negative, but I do have other pictures like this one here of a lily. And yeah, I mean, these are real darkroom prints. They're made in the darkroom. This happens to be on resin-coated paper. They're already fully matted to 11 by 14, so this can go right into a frame. It's easier to ship that way, so I don't have to ship a frame with glass that might break and damage the photograph. So there's a lot of different flower pictures. This is kind of what I started with on the store, so definitely check that out if you're interested. All the proceeds obviously help this channel grow, help me buy film, and help me produce more educational content for you guys. So give it a check out. Link in the description. So now for the last photograph. This is from the Intrepid with the bellows extended pretty much to the max. I think it's 540 millimeter focal length, which ends up with the way that I designed the pinhole to create a 2:1 macro of something that is about 1 foot away from the actual pinhole lens board. And this is the result. Now this is, again, a 2:1 macro, so this is twice of what life size is. So it's kind of cool seeing that magnifying effect. And the reason that I use this, I talked about it in the video, but you know, if you do something theoretically like I did on the chalkboard when I was discussing how this is a f1080 lens, and you know, reciprocity and exposure times are insane. You know, it's one thing to do the theory on paper, it's another thing to try and put it into practice. So I really decided that, you know, I keep talking this big game about all the science of photography, and I was like, well, why don't we test and see if all these calculations are correct? And what ended up happening was that this ended up being a 2-hour exposure, and the reason for that is because, one, the effective aperture is so tiny. You have the bellows extension factor going on, and it's just, everything is just super long exposure times, even with the bright LED lights. And on top of that, you have the fact that there's film reciprocity. So reciprocity basically says that film loses sensitivity over time, so the longer your exposures, you have to actually add more exposure time to compensate. So when I did all the calculations, I think it was about a 25 or something like that, 25-minute exposure if it was no reciprocity. But if you extrapolate the reciprocity chart provided by Kodak, it ended up being like hour and a half, hour 45. So I just let it go for 2 hours, erring on the side of overexposure, because film has more resilience to overexposure than underexposure, especially Kodak T-Max 400. So using that, 2 hours later, it's funny, you know, I took the images, kind of got something to eat, and then came back and looked at my watch, and still a lot of time left. So 2 hours later, this is what happened, and I'm really excited how this came out. There's a little bit of scratch in the film, which kind of bums me out, but as a proof of concept, again, not like the greatest photograph. It's very hard to do composition on this because the window is so tight and narrow. I probably could have done a better job separating this bulb from the flower if I just rotated this a little bit so that this unblooming bulb was probably closer to here, and I got a little bit more of this stem in view just by moving the whole camera over to the left a little bit. Very difficult to compose, but as a proof of concept, I'm just happy that this negative came out, and that's one of the things, you know, the beauty of film. You cross your fingers and you think you did everything right, but it's not over until it's over and you actually have that negative in your hands. So those were the 3 images that I made for Worldwide Pinhole Photography Day. I know it's been a while, but did you guys get to participate? If so, let me know in the comments. What cameras did you use? What film did you use? What were your subject matters, and how the pictures turn out? I mean, post your Flickr links or any kind of image sharing service links, and I'd like to see what the community has been doing. We're going to take a little break on this channel from pinhole photography, which I've been doing a lot of lately. Again, not having access to the darkroom is a challenge to make prints, but I'm still photographing, and I will be making prints in the future. We actually probably should talk about scanning techniques for people who don't have access to darkrooms. So that will definitely be in future videos. And as I alluded to, we're doing platinum palladium printing, which I'm still trying to learn and master, but as soon as, well, master is years away, but as soon as I have a good handle on things, I'll definitely be sharing that information with you guys. And because you know, on this channel, I love all thing Polaroid and all thing large format, I was able to acquire some 8x10 color Polaroid film. So we're talking about Polaroid pictures, how to develop them. You need that special machine developer, which squeezes the 2 sides of the sort of the packet, development pod, and the negative or positive in this case, squeezes them together through the rollers, and then we can actually do emulsion lifts where we can take those photographs, we can kind of heat them up, lift the emulsion off of the actual Polaroid sort of sandwich that you get, and then you can transfer those onto like watercolor paper, and I think you get some really cool results with that, and I've had success with that in the past. So we'll definitely be exploring some other areas, and I do want to start a new educational series taking you through the beginning of film photography all the way through, from buying your first camera, considerations, different film types, all the way through, you know, fundamentals of exposure, which I already have videos on, but they're kind of wordy and lengthy, and I get that. So trying to break it down into more of like classroom format with different courses and little subtopics and all that kind of stuff. So subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, because there's a lot of content coming forward, and it's going to be a lot of fun in my opinion. So if there's anything you'd like to see, leave comments down below, what you like, what you dislike about this channel. Give me some feedback, and hopefully there'll be a lot more videos coming out very soon, and I hope to see you there. So until then, as always, happy photographing.